While we were in San Francisco, we actually got to meet with an accessibility advocate who works with the Paul K. Longmore Institute on Disability, Catherine Kudlick.
We had a really great chat with her.
We're part of San Francisco State University, and we're a small organization that does public outreach and public programming. We try to bring scholarship and activism together to kind of change the conversation around disability. And our message is just, our mission is the world is better because of disabled people. We want to create a society where people believe that.
Kathy educated us about some of the more eye-opening historic things that happened in San Francisco. Turns out that the city was at the forefront of making the United States a much more accessible place for people with disabilities.
In 1973, they passed a law. It was the 1973 Rehabilitation Act, and this law contained within it the germs of civil rights legislation for people with disabilities. When a law passes in the United States, it's not enough for the law to pass. You need to have it implemented. So you need to show, how it's going to be enforced, who's going to take responsibility for it, all of those things. And that had not been outlined yet, but they were just kind of hemming and hawing and trying to figure it out and not sure. And so the disability advocates that had been, really waiting pretty patiently for a while just said, no, we're going to have actions in cities across the United States. And so they said, we're going to fan out across the country and have actions. And they did. They went to the 10 federal offices across the United States. They went into the federal building in San Francisco. About 150 people went in. People in wheelchairs and people in, people with canes and dogs and whatever. And they said, we're going to stay here till you sign this legislation.
We say that's the sound of the song going down when the people of the world start to paint the time. A day that's long is a day complete. So
we visited some of the places that Kathy spoke about, the federal buildings around San Francisco's Capitol. We visited the Health, Education, and Welfare Building, which is famous for the sit-in. Pretty amazing spot. This is where some of the major events in accessibility history got started.
So this group occupied the federal building. A lot of the people that went in didn't have any idea that they'd never protested before, they'd never left home before, never slept away from,
That's so crazy, because when you think about what it would take for somebody,
exactly.
an average person to just go out
any person, yeah.
So it wound up going on for close to a month?
Yeah, 20, depending on how you count it, 26, 28 days.
If I just think about her like that,
You would have been out in the plaza protesting, you would have been in helping, whatever. That's the thing.
So
well,
for 27 days.
You rise to the...
You wouldn't have thought about it. Exactly.
Being in the very place where dozens of people with all sorts of disabilities sat for days on end to make an impact was really powerful.
Everywhere except for San Francisco, they were either frozen out or denied meds or forcibly removed, or there was, different places had different things. San Francisco was different. You need certain things in place for a movement to succeed. So you need sort of buy-in from the political community. San Francisco is a very progressive city, especially at the time. And so there was a lot of expectation that the city would defend the rights of people that weren't as powerful, and so local politicians and even locally elected officials like Congress people were also on board with thinking, we need to view this as a rights issue. The organizers in San Francisco, Judy Heumann and Kitty Cohn, had built these relationships with different community groups. One of the people that was inside the building and his attendant were members of the Black Panther Party. And the Panthers had a whole program related to feeding people. And they said, we are going to feed the people in the federal building. So every day they provided home-cooked meals that they delivered. And one of the coolest things about the story is how they educated each other, and sort of a disability rights movement came about because people were together in this building. It was an amazing moment. So these people all educated each other, but they also helped each other. So we have stories of people that needed to be turned in the night because of having bed sores when they slept. So, blind people can turn somebody in the middle of the night, bed sores, deaf people can do it. And, and then these people with, that needed to be turned in the night were reading press releases or reading other stuff, reading lists of things to do, reading books, reading whatever out loud.
So there's group consciousness, this group
yeah,
effort
and
that actually
interdependence, which is the new key word, I think, really for disability stuff. It's, for so long it's been independence, and I can do it, and I can tough it out, and I can live by myself, and I don't need help, and I'll hold a job, and I'll make my contribution. The newer language is all about interdependence and sort of, people, kind of the idea that you bring the slowest people up with everybody else, because that's really where power is. And
It was very powerful and resulted in Carter actually signing the law.
So yeah, it was one of these wonderful moments where everybody said, these weak, powerless people don't have any whatever, and they stood up, or kind of pushed back, I guess is a better word, against the most powerful. Yeah, some stood up, some didn't, but they pushed against, against the most powerful government in the world, and they won.
Incredible.
The decisions that happened as a result of this sit-in were actually the front runners to the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, which make this great country so accessible as we know it today. I had never heard of any of this stuff.
It's not in a single textbook for any school.
How is this not talked about? It was such a huge thing that
I don't know. I think people with disabilities are often seen as marginal and helpless, and that history doesn't matter. And I think that's where the problems start. And so nobody looked for it. I mean, I have a vision impairment, and disability history is a field that I was one of the people that helped to found as a topic of research and discovery. And most people are, oh, that's very marginal. And that's part because they really just think in this narrow, idea that disability is something unfortunate that happens to a lone individual. You've got to fix it, and it doesn't touch on any of the other important things that are going on. So let's just fix this person, or let's not even look at this person because they make me uncomfortable, and whatever.
Right.
Rather than saying, whoa, there's a whole set of things in our society that are possible because of people with disabilities.
Absolutely.
And,
I totally
from
agree with
cell
that.
phones to curb cuts
Ease of
to
access
captions,
for everybody.
yeah. It really is all about framing.
I think the way that you see disability has a huge impact on the way that you view the world. Kathy refocused our lens to see people with disabilities as world changers, as powerful, dynamic, change-making people.
I use this with school kids all the time, and I hold up a pirate like this, and I say, what is this? And everybody says, a pirate, and then I will say, have you ever thought of it as a disability action figure? And I talk about the peg leg, the hooked arm, what are we dealing with? We're dealing with amputation, we're dealing with, blindness in one eye, who knows what else.
Right.
This is a place, it's a way in for kids and others to kind of start questioning the assumptions they make around disability, because pirates are active, they're dynamic, they're seen as, strong, exactly. And, not that every disabled person has to be strong and active and dynamic in this way, but what it does is I think it's useful because it flips people's thinking, and it makes them say, whoa, why didn't I think of that before?
It also kind of just amped us up a little bit more to get out on the high seas. We just didn't know how we were going to do that right away.
If somebody with a peg leg and an eye patch and a hook
And a drinking problem.
and a parrot could make it, so could we.